Welcome back to some more Rolled in Economica. So, for I remember where we last left off, Barton invited Hal to a little appointment, and aside from all the lecturing and such when it comes to the stock market, I think it was going to show him around how he does the stocks. So, let's continue reading. Barton started the engine again and pulled the car out slowly. And from my experience, those who could read well the sentiment of the market are those who can easily see these patterns. Even looking at the same thing, sometimes you'll feel something different or see something different, right? It isn't something you can train yourself in, it's innate. I couldn't figure innate, whatever the word is. I couldn't figure out what I should say while being praised. I could only look abashedly downwards, grunting from time to time. Well, what's left is the work of finding the right connections with people. Sometimes you see someone who keep coming back no matter how many failures. The most famous one is that real estate tycoon Daniel Trapp. Trapp? Oh, you don't know? He's a man who's earned the nickname America's Mr. Resilience. At the age of 40, he already declared bankruptcy 3 times, and every time the amount of losses increased, the third time was a $1.2 billion debt causing the company to founder. However, 4 years later, he bought a $900 million building in Manhattan, named it shamelessly Trap Tower, and made it into a top-class commercial building. Why would such people exist? Was he a genius with finance? Well, there certainly is that point. That guy's ridiculously smart and his memory is excellent. However, if he were really a financial genius, he wouldn't have gone bankrupt all those times. What he is a genius of is interpersonal relationships. While talking, Barton pulled the car into the Lunar University campus. There wasn't a gatekeeper and no one really paid attention or tried to stop the car. Perhaps class was in session, and as there weren't really many people walking around on campus, the car entered a narrower road and stopped some ways down. Barton got out of the car slowly and stood next to a sandwich shop on the side of the road. He didn't look once over at me, so I figured he wasn't beckoning for me to follow him out of the car. Furthermore, Barton was like a regular, with the shop staff being very friendly. He received the sandwiches in paper bags, and when he was paying, he paid using a 100 mule bill. And he didn't take any change. He patted the shop employee. What the heck? He patted the shop employee with his big hands, waved his hands, and left the shop. Wearing a huge smile as if he had a fond conversation, he walked over to the driver's seat, opened the door, and got in. Here's lunch. He handed me a paper bag, waved again at the store, and started driving. No matter how much a person earns, he could only take 3 meals a day. Furthermore, there aren't many guys who try out a different store each day. In other words, people generally have set places where to eat. It's very true of academics. If a professor in biology, chemistry, or engineering stopped having sandwiches, which could be eaten with one hand, there was a high chance that he got headhunted by a company. If a professor had previously been eating beef sandwiches topped with tons of cheese, started suddenly eating plain tomato sandwiches, then there's a high possibility he's getting wined and dined at night. The easiest way to tell is through what cars they drive to work, though. Barton bit into the sandwich, holding it in one hand. How was he eating and focusing while driving at the same time? No person in real life would do crap like that. On one hand, in exchange for me eating there, I can gather information like that. I've been with that employee for some time now. He also gets my nuisance and remembers almost everyone who would come by campus to scout out potential recruits. As for looking into headhunting on campus, I feel confident that I have more power to gather information than professional journalists, since professional journalists can't afford to pay for lunch with 100 mule bills. Saying that, Barton winked mischievously. Daniel Trapp was good at this, ridiculously good, and therefore he gathers tons of information and exploits it. Of course, being able to sniff out whether information is legitimate and having the will to make decisions at opportune moments is also necessary. It's same as the markets. Gather as much information as possible, sniff out what's reliable, and bet on it either directly or indirectly. What do you think? Doesn't this float your boat more than stuff about volatility, sigma, and some such? Suddenly being asked that, I choked on an easy-to-swallow piece of chicken. But he was right. I couldn't make heads or tails of the Greek letters written down in Haganah's electronic notebook. I didn't really have an interest in them either. Traders who surrender to a quant's program will eventually leave the field because of psychological issues. Oh shit, he could be right. Being able to tell whether a coin is heads or tails is a special privilege reserved for humans. The day one clicks that right to a machine is the day one stops being human. I had nightmares of my body turning into Greek letters. That really was what Barton was talking about. My mind blown. Open your eyes and see the world. Things humans touch must involve human thought in some way. The car stopped at a light. Barton, while still looking straight ahead, spoke. Would you like to do some real trading instead of playing with numbers? Well, there's this goddamn notification crap. Anyway, when I was God damn it. Well, when I was about to answer, this car started moving. Barton continued looking straight ahead, not saying a word. The side of his face strongly showed something that made me feel that he was a human. If decision is a right reserved to humans, then only I had the special right to decide what about Barton's proposal. However, I don't trust quants, and I don't think it's in your best interest to do so either. He turned the wheel and headed the car towards the suburbs. I think it's best if you two parted ways. Barton said it out straightforwardly. Parting ways with Haganah. I try to imagine this situation. I'd be liberated from the program and start as a member of the financial district. And furthermore, I'd be by Barton's side, someone who gleaned corporate information impossible to obtain from the numbers, and invested in using that information. He was someone who had looked deeply into classical trading methods, gathering information from the day-to-day work of people and using that as a hint to make decisions. It was something that a machine definitely couldn't do. My beloved mafia films and war films were exactly like that. In these films, there were principles one must follow and practicalities that one must consider. Furthermore, there was this thing called experience. I had a feeling I was trying to look at people's true thoughts by looking at the movement of stocks. However, Barton gathered information from a much more fundamental source and made decisions based on it. It was, to put it bluntly, so cool. It was a bit mundane, but it was the most down-to-earth investment method that I could think of. Anyway, to determine the presence of that special employee cafeteria required the use of surveillance through binoculars. If that were futile, then I felt that anything would be futile. My dream was to collect humanity's wealth and embark onto undiscovered territory. It definitely wasn't just to collect up nest eggs from people in poverty and help them to pay back their loans. However, I had forgotten about my goals for such a long time now. But I had an obvious reason for being hesitant. It was Haganah. I was wondering about whether Haganah would be able to continue doing well if I were to leave. If I were to leave, god damn, every time this damn notification occurs, that's why I have to clear all of that. There we go. Anyway, what was I going to do? Oh yeah, I was wondering about whether Haganah would be able to continue doing well if I would leave. The program was obviously working. However, Barton's words were correct and eventually it stopped working. And then she and Lisa in church would come across an impasse. I trusted that Lisa was an adult, but I felt like something was missing from her and her ability to struggle on was weak. And that went without saying for Haganah. Furthermore, even if I were tormented by Haganah's program, I wasn't tormented by Haganah herself. Haganah had even started to worry about my health. She wasn't a bad person. In fact, perhaps she was too honest of a person. I obviously couldn't just throw away someone like Haganah like that. Could you give me some time? It took all my effort to just blurt that out. He was a rich magnate who'd garner respect at the Grand Central Hotel. Normally, he wouldn't even talk to a kid like me. It was fortune smiling upon me, an unbelievable amount of luck. However, I had no other option but to say that, of course. Barton had answered me immediately. The car eventually reached the 6-hour section. I got out of the car at this point and said my thanks for today. He didn't make this passionate farewell scene like last time, but at the end he smiled at me from the driver's seat. Oh, yeah. So, Barton gave Hal a decision. He's whether to show him what he does when it comes to stock market or not, how he trades. Anyway, he didn't make this passionate farewell scene like last time, blah, blah. But at the end, he smiled at me from the driver's seat. See ya. That way of parting was really awesome. I looked at Barton's car until it blended in with the other cars, then started walking back. He didn't make that passionate farewell scene like last time. Really awesome. I looked at Barton's car until it blended in with the other cars and started walking back. I understood the principles under which I operated. Sometimes I'm sorry to say, sometimes I had to repeat the freaking dialogue just to get on track. Anyway, under which I operated, my goal was also clear as day. Therefore, I knew the solution to my problem. I trudged along to the church. It looked like time was a little past 2. Oh boy, time flies by fast. It was a time period where I get a scolding from the police if I started loitering around. I wasn't really feeling it, but I heaved a big sigh and bounced from rooftop to rooftop until I made it to the church. Therefore, it was by chance that I managed to see it. If I had just walked the way I was along the street, I would have made it back to the church. As I was about to jump down from the neighbor's roof onto the church's roof, I could sort of see the yard on the 3rd floor. Lisa would have been working at the Chinese restaurant and no one else would have been around. It had to be Hagana. Furthermore, since the napping set Lisa provided for Hagana was all soft, pure white cushions and blankets, the black-clad Hagana really stood out. I had discovered a sleeping Hagana when I lowered myself into the 3rd floor yard. She really took my suggestion to rest to heart and was actually resting, for once. Even if it was obvious that she was trying to copy all of my actions, I knew she was dead serious in her own way of trying to adjust the values. Due to air circulation on the moon, sometimes the wind did blow. At that moment came a wind and slowly caressed the scene. The lilies fluttered, the leaves in the big tree fluttered, and Hagana's bangs fluttered. That's a lot of fluttered. When she was sleeping, she really was an ordinary girl. Furthermore, when I looked closer, she was hugging her terminal tightly while sleeping, a bit farther away from her lay 2 cups. Perhaps Chris came over during the day and studied with her. Anyone, even if they were not Hagana, would want to protect this tranquil lifestyle, for example, by trying to help out their frantically hard-working children like Chris. According to Barton, if someone used the same methods as Quans, these methods would get outdated and their performance would drop. In other words, if I were to call it off between us, then Hagana would eventually lose a way to earn money. Burying herself in cushions and grunting like a baby occasionally, she was sound asleep. A single person became her because she was sold, and she was swallowed up by the unfairness of the world. However, I had to chase my own dreams. For that, Barton was a stepping stone I definitely needed. Therefore, I decided I could only do this. I walked over to Hagana and looked down at her sleeping face. Hagana frowned a bit at the slight reduction of light hitting her and woke up. Once she noticed it was me, she rubbed her eyes and then checked her skirt awkwardly. When we first met, she never cared about getting peeked on from below. What? She squinted at me and asked. And here was what I said. Let's get first in the investment contest. Huh? Hagana replied. Was it the most important thing, the debt that everyone had? She looked like she was about to respond with that, but I was thinking about something totally different. If she got the contest money, then she'd be able to live her life freely until she could enter college. No matter how hard it is for them to live on their own, 200,000 rubles should be plenty enough. If her program could just make some money for a bit longer, then what should be prioritized would be the investment contest that was coming to a close soon. The other people's debts could just be paid back slowly. Hagana's program would be able to hold out until then, right? And once that happened, I could part ways with Hagana and head over to Barton. What's the reason? Cutting off the questioning Hagana, I replied, please. Huh? She got herself up on the cushions and was stunned. The lunar wind blew warmly and slowly. Hagana's beautiful hair swayed in the wind. "Is this something important to you?" she asked very directly. Even if I had lied and said it was, wouldn't she simply just accepted and nod? That was probably the case. The reason she fell upon Lisa's church was probably because she had a mean face, doubted everything, and yet was unable to stand on her own. Oh boy. When in doubt, when it comes to two situations, you gotta work on one by one. No matter how stressful it is. Yet was unable to stand on her own. However, it was something important to me. There was no lie there. That's correct. Hagana stared at me. Then she looked away, rubbed the hem of her skirt gently, and looked back up. I see. Hagana stood up. Perhaps she was buried too deeply in the cushions while sleeping, because as soon as she stood up, she had a very strong and distinctive scent. "We are really far behind, Mr. Troche." Hagana pointed it out. Here was my reply. We'll just have to catch up to him. And to my words, Hagana appeared to have laughed lightly. Since trading in the real market up until now led to tidy profits that no one could complain about, there was only so much that could be earned by winning the investment contest from Hagana's point of view. Currently, including funds entrusted to us, my own capital, and the amount I was going to give to Hagana, the total amount had swelled to 600,000 mules. In other words, a 10% increase would be 60,000 mules of profit, and 20% of that would end up being 12,000 mules for myself. Hagana's share of 20% would come out to 2,400 mule, and even if we did poorly, a 10% profit was doable in a day. The general outlook on my assets put me at 180,000 mules. I started out with 70,000 mules and made a profit of 110,000 mules. 20% of that was Hagana's share, so at present, Hagana's compensation was above 30,000 mules. In other words, Hagana was only 20,000 mules away from being able to completely pay off Lisa's loan. At the current pace of 3,000 to 4,000 mules in profit each day, Quick and Dirty made it so that it wouldn't even take 10 days to accomplish the goal. On top of that, in terms of actual trading, we weren't the only ones who profited. She could greatly help Chris, who had no hope of getting into a university where she had no money despite having a gifted intellect, as well as the residents of the outer section struggling with debt. It was natural to think that Hagana was more focused on that than the investment contest itself. It was completely irrational. With the investment contest, no matter how well you did, the prize money was 200,000 mules. After paying off Lisa's 50,000 mule loan, we split the difference. Naturally, that was no small amount of money, but real-world trading had no restrictions on how many days you could trade. If you spent more time on it, then that time spent would lead to greater profits and an increase in the number of people who could be helped. Nevertheless, Hagana complied with my wishes and focused on the contest. She didn't even ask for reasons. She didn't even know that I had intended to give the 200,000 mule prize money entirely to her. Naturally, I didn't mention that after the contest ended in the near future, I would cut ties with Hagana and work with Barton. Without knowing and without wanting to know, Hagana had offered to help me, though I wondered if she knew that I was hiding something from her. It was possible that she wasn't the type to think about such things. I don't know, who knows. Overdevelop those skills in mathematics and everything else falls on the wayside, as Barton said it. I have believed those words, and I also believed in something entirely different. The day after Hagana and I decided that we focus on the investment contest, we had really stayed focused. That day was supposed to be a day off, but we quickly got to training in the living room and achieved a virtual 2 million mules in profit. Hagana's program was a powerful weapon, making it feel like taking a test, while knowing all the answers, and thus it made trading successful. It did scare me that someday a program might make me obsolete. Yeah, right. Even though you're run by a machine, it's not gonna fuck you over. I mean, in other words, what's the word? Like replace you. Obsolete. However, in pursuing a goal, this was a more reassuring tool than anything out there for facing that challenge and pushing forward. Besides, recently Hagana had become concerned about my physical well-being and seemed to have a lot of questions to ask. Whether training was over or not, I was inundated with questions. I was surprised that she wanted to know so much, but I wondered whether or not I could beat that much zeal. Even as the day waned, without realizing it, Hagana and I would look into our computers and have discussions in a completely dark living room. We came back to our senses only when Lisa returned from the Lunar Chinese restaurant and turned on the lights in the living room. Lisa was honestly pleased that I was better again. But what really bothered me the most was when Lisa turned to Hagana and said, "Good for you, too," to her. Hagana was as surprised as I was, and she looked between Lisa and me repeatedly. Then I saw that her face was red. She looked down and nodded. Well, this was awkward. This was the other half of the reason Hagana offered to listen to my request. More than I had imagined, Hagana had forgiven me. By nature, she was very sincere. She knew that Lisa could see that she was overdoing it a bit. It's not far-fetched to say that this was thanks for helping Hagana make use of her mathematical abilities in a real-world setting. But I could see that to Hagana this was a simple matter of thanks. Even that day, as if a bath would be a waste of time, she would drag on discussions with me while fiddling with the numerical output of her program, until Lisa finally got mad and forced her to go. Not even 5 minutes would elapse before she'd come right back out. This time she made sure to put on her pajamas, but she didn't take the time to dry her wet hair. Lisa stopped taking any chances and would proceed to wipe Hagana's hair with a bath towel, then finish by wrapping it around her hair. The table in the living room was lined up with work materials, and I could see the nape of Hagana's neck with her hair bundled up like that. The strands of her hair and her white, slender neck made her look like a really beautiful, mature woman. Late at night, after Lisa's growing impatience forced me to return to my room, I mailed Barton. Due to various circumstances, please wait until the end of the investment contest for a response, I wrote. Barton's response came immediately, and the content said, "Not a problem." Despite Barton being a wealthy man who went in and out of the Grand Central Hotel and calmly rode around in a high-class limousine, he didn't seem to exhibit any arrogance or domineering nature. He was a man with a big heart who dealt with me as an individual. I had an inkling more or less of how exhausting it was working at Schrodinger Street based on rumors on the net and books, not even being treated as a human being and having barely any time to sleep. There were only a small number of people with high-paying salaries, and a whole lot of them were often fired after 1 or 2 years. In return, when they hit it big, the returns were massive. However, there were ways to bypass the common routes where you gathered up capital and, at your own discretion, invested in a fund and managed it. One could work solo and still amass a fortune. That reason was why it was normal practice for people to join a major financial institution on Schrodinger Street. It was to build up knowledge and then go solo afterwards. That was why there was probably no more fortuitous situation than training under Barton's wing. If you looked up the Britannica on the net, it was number 32 on the list of 5,000 top investment funds in the world by percentage return. The total assets under management were 30 billion rubles, while Barton's annual salary was 100 billion rubles. If I were to train under Barton and then study more beyond that after going solo, I could earn more than Barton and possibly surpass him as well. The number one fund manager made 2 billion rubles a year. In just a few years' time, the amount of money made wouldn't be any different from the budget for a small country. By that time, I would have many connections and anything would be possible. A dream about coming upon the undiscovered country. For that dream, I must cut ties with Hagana. On the other hand, without me around, Hagana's investment program would lose momentum and cease being able to earn her money. I couldn't pick both. That was why it was necessary to acquire the 200,000 ruble prize money in the investment contest. Morning. We ran into each other by chance after waking up in the morning. Hagana was the first to issue a clear greeting. Ah, I replied as we both went into the living room. In the living room, Lisa had prepared breakfast. When she saw Haganah and me come in at the same time, she smiled gently. Yeah, why do I need to turn this sound effect a bit more? What was it? Prepare breakfast. When she saw Haganah and me coming at the same time, she smiled gently. Okay, then what else? Today there are 72 stocks. Volatility is really high, and there were a number of stocks with large price fluctuations. I want you to be careful. I got it. I'm no amateur. I said that while I chewed on some toast, and I knew that Lisa was holding back laughter while she held a coffee cup by the sink. Well, aren't you being cheeky? Was that she really wanted to say, I suppose. But Barton had called out to me, seeing my impressive trading skills. Even now, I was entrusted with many people's money and reaping large profits. Even though that was thanks to Haganah's program, the basis for that program was based on my judgment. Just as long as the program don't malfunction, of course. Thus, I didn't think it was a bluff. This was the foundation of confidence. Haganah no longer sat at the other end of the table. She was now always sitting beside me as we ate. Sitting there next to me, Haganah asked me a question. If you aren't an amateur, then what are you? Sarcasm? No, I didn't think so. I replied to the expressionless Haganah. An investor. An investor? But I don't intend to use the money I stole from my mother. I threw those words directly at Haganah. It seemed that Haganah remembered suddenly, and she looked like she was about to cry as she pulled back. But even then, Haganah kept looking at me and repeated once more quietly, An investor? Yeah. Looking at the display, I said, We are investors. Next to me, Haganah took a deep breath, which signaled that she understood. As she leaned against the sink, drinking coffee while she watched the exchange between Haganah and me, Lisa smiled without saying a single word and began to wash dishes. We was what I said. There was no question who that other person was. We'll destroy Mr. Troche. I said that as I glanced at Haganah. We'll destroy. Oh god, that just had me laughing. Holy crap. We'll destroy. Glanced. Anyway, Haganah's eyes were unwavering as she nodded, like she was staring down a target in a mafia movie. The heck is this, a Scarface reference? With 500 million mools of funds in the virtual market, 3 times what margin trading would be 1.5 billion mools. I was well aware of the fact that it would be impossible, were this to be on the real market, to shed such a massive sum of money quickly. However, in the virtual setting, all participants were given 100 million mools to start with. Thanks to that, contestants could get totally immersed in large volume trading in a rough and tumble manner. If that became the case, then I would really be at an uncontested advantage. With my perspective on the program now changed, I felt like a fish released in water, able to swim around the market with total freedom. On top of that, the total funds and rankings were updated every minute of every day, so I was thankful that I didn't have to be wary of high rollers like in a casino. It was completely possible in reality for a single person out there with a disgustingly large amount of money to mow down a complete competition. That was the true form of the demons who lurked in the first 10 minutes of trading. Here and there I had seen some come together like piranhas ready to tear apart game, but in my opinion, what was anticipated was so clearly obvious that it would be difficult to derive any profit. Lure things in with bait and, when they come close, attack. With Haganah's program, I knew how much prices had to move before people using similar programs to trade would flock to the stock. Each transaction would yield 0.3% or 0.5%, which wasn't much in terms of profit. The time spent looking over at Haganah's terminal was precious, and before long, Haganah started to read the stocks out loud. On top of that, Haganah in her own way had a strong personality and did not know anything about taking it easy. As I listened to her raging words, I started trading like crazy so that even the time to breathe seemed precious. Naturally, it destroyed me. The fatigue was no different from torture. In the instant that the morning's trading was completed, I looked straight up as if my computer gave me an electric shock. Taking a deep breath, I fell back against the chair without another thought. I couldn't move an inch. I couldn't utter a single word. Even with my eyes closed, the numbers swirled in my head. The necessity to do one thing or another caused a feeling of unease to swirl around in my mind. But it wasn't because I was not feeling well. Facing my objective, no matter what tools I used, it was clear what I had to do. After all, what I was doing was no different from when I was suffering before. In fact, the intensity was much higher, but I wasn't feeling bad about it. You sure? Furthermore, 3 days after we started concentrating on the investment contest, Agata brought me a damp towel warmed in the microwave since I was slumped on my back, staring at the ceiling. I imagine Lisa had suggested that she do that, but I was really happy she did. Yeah, you should be very glad. She's taking care of you. Even though trading was over, she didn't get up from her chair. She continued to sit next to me, tapping away at her terminal. Agana herself also needed rest, so she closed her eyes at times. It was very quiet, and even though we only looked at each other when we talked, somehow it felt very friendly. I knew that we were both running towards the same destination. Once the break was over, we'd eat, proceed with the afternoon trading, and then limp on until dinner, exhausted to the point of not being able to stand. At dinner, we could return to being human again, with Lisa providing some light banter while Agata stayed by my side, making improvements to her program. Our virtual funds were increasing in 10 million intervals. We could make it there in no time. Unsurprisingly, Mr. Troche, who had an MBA from Harvard University, completely controlled the market. A week before we had to start trading, he had amassed 360 million wools through his trades. While the increase in assets was rather shocking, I said to myself that it wasn't an impossible plateau to reach. But to close all positions with such precision was impressive to him, I thought. With the market this frantic, there was a chance prices would go up, but also a chance you'd lose the shirt off your back. Specifically, if you had Mr. Troche's levels of assets, there was a possibility you could get targeted with what trades you were making analyzed. There were already a number of people who had been targeted and had fallen tremendously in the rankings. The secret to how that worked was that even for people who had finished their trading but had unclosed positions, the amount of money displayed next to the rankings would change as the stocks moved every day. Were someone to use a program like Agana's, one could ferret out those stocks by looking at all available stocks and computing possible candidates by comparing the price fluctuation of stocks with the movement of the fortunes of the top-ranked participants. After that, all that would be necessary would be to join forces with others to do some reverse trading. We were sitting in fourth place at 150 million wools, with the distance to second place being 100 million wools and third place being about half that amount away. Technically, there was 1 week left, but there was a Sunday in between, which made for 6 actual days of trading possible. With Sunday in the middle, after trading on Monday and Tuesday, it would all end at 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Agana and I mustered all our available strength. The moment a loss was taken due to carelessly not heeding a warning from the program, Agana would lash out with that foot of hers, and when she misread something about certain stocks, I'd yell at her afterwards. Even then, things didn't turn gloomy. I knew that Lisa would become excited many times during all of this, but it never made things worse. Exactly. 30 million wools of profit on Thursday and 20 million wools on Friday put us just at 200 million wools, passing the guy at third place by a narrow margin with only 40 million wools between us and second place. There was still the 160 million wool difference between us and Mr. Troche. For Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we had to increase our total gain by 80% at all costs. We were trading completely with full leverage, so it was no different from having 600 million wools at our disposal. So all we had to do was to achieve a real return of 27%, returns of 10%, 10%, and 10% would be more than sufficient. But based on the performance on Thursday and Friday, whether this was possible or not was unclear. Honestly, we were trading at an unprecedented level. We were pushing ourselves with all our might, and Hagana was whittling down her sleeping hours. She'd camp out, waiting for Lisa to go to bed, then sneak into my room, working on improving the program until morning. There were times where she would be sleeping like a log beside me. Also, she was sleep deprived a lot more and would drop her chopsticks or spoon more often during meals. We both knew that we were nearing our limits. However, Lisa wouldn't object. There was no room for her to do so. On Saturday, at the end of our discussion, we thought about taking on more risk. Fiddling with the numbers on the program in order to select a number of stocks with large price fluctuations, we selected more speculative stocks. For the ones with large price fluctuations, many were selected through derivations based off the mathematical principles Hagana utilized. It was an unattainable region, much like the concept Barton had spoke of, a region of extreme rises and falls where human sentiment could clearly be seen. In the midst of all this tension, Hagana and I began Saturday's trading. We felt strong progress as I was suddenly able to knock down the feeling of tension from feeling the time crunch. Hagana went so far as to borrow Lisa's terminal and asked Sorrel to copy the program. During trading, the program's content was updated in real time. Doing all this while being asleep, deprived, and exhausted, we weren't looking so healthy. But even so, at the end of Saturday, when she saw that we had managed to hit 60 million rubles of profit, even Hagana was all smiles. For the moment, we were in second place, only 2 more times. If we could do that again 2 more times, we could defeat Mr. Troche. That excitement blew away all that fatigue and sleep deprivation, whatever you could pronounce. We had set foot upon new territory. No, more accurately, it was Hagana's program that led me right into the footsteps of a deeper place within me. But even then, I wasn't against the idea. If there was something I could give to Hagana, I was determined to give her everything. An email from Barton arrived on my computer. Interesting, it said. Barton, who paid the sponsorship fee and could look at the trading history of all participants in the trading contest, could believe that we had gone a step further based on our trading history. Saturday night, that excitement was a helping hand as Hagana and I researched stocks and updated our program in my room till 3 in the morning. But no matter how much willpower was replenished, the body has its limits. Pathetically, I was the first to give in, and I slept that day. Hagana said she had more things to think about and got up, but given how often that had already happened thus far, I paid her no heed and continued to sleep. Light fell upon the desk as Hagana tapped her terminal, but the call of sleep was enough that I paid absolutely no heed to this as I slipped back into unconsciousness. Alright, I think I did enough here for now, so I'm just going to save here. So, next part, we're going to find out what happens next, because the second place is close, competition is at its peak, but I wonder what happens next. Again, I said that phrase. So, see you then.